Hello, my name is Ashley. Today I will be interviewing two professors from Harvard University. This here is Professor Arturo Segura.
Hi.
And on your right, Professor Diego Strozzi.
Well, hello.
First, I will start off by asking a few questions about the presidents during the stock. Alright, first question. Who were the presidents during the Great Depression?
Well, I think Herbert Hoover and Franklin D. Roosevelt was presidents at the time.
Correct. Good job. Next question. Specifically, who was the president during the stock market crash of 19...
He thought that the crash was a part of the passing recession. Ever since the crash, Hoover was working ceaselessly to fix
What
the
did
economy.
Herbert Hoover do in response to the stock market crash in 1929?
At first, President Hoover tried to organize national optimism by summoning business to D.C. to declare that conditions were sound and that there would not be wage cutting. When that did not work, he became inactive for a while, trusting to the idea that it would all self-correct. When that did not work, he organized an international moratorium in war debts and reparations. This actually did help stem the slide further into depression, but only briefly.
He set up the Recreation Finance Corp to bring federal aid to hard-pressed banks and businesses, just as it seemed that this might work and that recovery was at hand. In the winter of 1932 through 1933, the banking system in America went into a tailspin. On March 4th, 1933, the American banking system ground to a complete halt. Hoover was able and intelligent president who attempted orthodox economic ideas, but became a victim to the collapse of the system.
What did Hoover refuse to involve in forcing fixed prices?
What? Are you serious right now? He did not want to involve the federal government. Yeah, did you know that? Did you?
Yes, I did.
No, you didn't.
Did you also know?
The great paradox of Herbert Hoover was that he had a reputation, a justifiable reputation, as being the great humanitarian for his work in World War I and for his work even as Secretary of Commerce under Calvin Coolidge. He understood how if businesses were prosperous, the families who were dependent on the breadwinners who worked for those businesses would be better. But he could not get into his head the notion that the federal government had a role to play in direct humanitarian aid to hard-stricken families.
Hoover is a real object lesson in the limitations of intelligence, experience, and even attentiveness in an effective president.
By the time Herbert Hoover ran for re-election in 1932, nearly a quarter of the nation's workforce was unemployed. Millions of Americans had lost their life savings. Entire communities were starving. And the farm economy was beyond the brink of disaster.
Now the battle must be continued. We have yet to go a long ways and to capture many positions to restore agriculture and employment. But it can be made plain that if the strategy which we have established is maintained, the battle not halted by change in the midst of action, we shall win.
Herbert Hoover had an unprecedented reputation for managing crisis and tapping into America's voluntary spirit. Yet in the face of an agricultural crisis, a stock market collapse, massive unemployment, and the failure of the international banking system, Herbert Hoover lost the confidence of the American people.
What is different between Herbert Hoover and Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the way they approached to the Great Depression?
Well, I think that Franklin was more motivated to get the economy back up. He set a bunch of new deals and reformations to try to fix the economy.
What was Franklin Delano Roosevelt's role in the Great Depression?
I bet you don't know that. You're going to take the fall? You know what? I think he was elected president because the people liked how he had a strong motivation to end the Depression. But at the end, he was not even able to fix the economy until World War II started.
What was the cause of death of Franklin Delano Roosevelt?
Well, it was a combination of things. It was heart ailments, high blood pressure, and bronchitis.
Great job. Next question. We'll be hitting the topic of Hoovervilles. How would you describe a Hooverville as?
What? You don't know this either? I'll
No,
say
I
it.
know
No,
this.
I'll say it. Whatever. I think it's a shanty town that appeared on the outskirts of major cities. It was for the unemployed that have been evicted from their homes. And I think Hoover was blamed for the tolerable economic
And social conditions, which is why they named the Hoovervilles out.
What were the conditions of the Hoovervilles?
They were not the best because they were for the poorest of the poor, for the people who had little to no money and no job. Many of the Hoovervilles were dirty and full of diseases. These houses offered low to no protection to the elements.
We shall see the break of dawn of the better day. I shall have done my part in the world. They used to tell me I was building a dream, and so I followed the mob. When there was earth to plow or guns to bear, I was always there, right on the job. They used to tell me I was building a dream, with peace and glory ahead. Why should I be standing in line, just waiting for bread? Once I built a railroad, I made it run, made it race against time. Once I built a railroad, now it's done. Brother, can you spare a dime? Once I built a tower up to the sun, brick and rivet and lime. Once I built a tower.
Okay, next question. Which crash was worse out of the two? 1929 or 1932?
I think in 1932, another crash even more horrific than the 1929 would occur. And the drop was so massive that it just dissolved every bit of profit that the stock market ever had. I think analysts were saying like that if the stock market would to go back to where it was in September 1929, it would take like 30 years.
Caused the Great Depression.
The Great Depression followed after the stock market crash of 1929. It had a rippling effect throughout the economy and the nation.
Yeah, and it produced a downward spiral that negatively impacted every piece of the population, even in other countries, not only U.S.
The U.S., I got it.
No, he didn't. I think I got that right.
Great job! You
So-
both answered it correctly.
That's 1 point each.
Yes, great job.
Cities had been so prosperous in so many places, not in the countryside. The farming industry was in very bad shape in the 1920s. But certainly in the cities, it was very prosperous. People were making fortunes on the stock market. And then all of a sudden, poof, it went. I mean, people, economists, very serious economists, had been saying that we'd reached a new level, a new plateau of prosperity in this country, and we were never going to go back. And then the crash happened.
All through the summer of 1929, there had been ominous rumblings. For months, unemployment had been rising. Automobile sales and department store revenues had fallen off sharply. Across the South and West, farms were failing in record numbers. And still on Wall Street, the delirious optimism continued, undimmed. On August 27th, 1929. The Dow Jones average reached its all-time peak as an army of frenzied buyers descended on New York, desperate not to miss a single day's trading, swamping the hotels, camping out on the street in front of the stock exchange, and in the tiny graveyard of Trinity Church on Broadway, where Alexander Hamilton lay buried.
What caused the crash of 29 was excess speculation. What had happened was that the American economy as a whole had begun to cool starting in 1928, and the Wall Street economy disconnected from the underlying real economy and became a speculative bubble. And this fueled this speculation that just took off and took off and took off until, again, one day somebody woke up and said, this has gone too far. There's an old story about Bernard Baruch, that he had his shoes shined every morning by the same shoe shine boy, and one morning the shoe shine boy gave him a stock tip. And Baruch went to his office, called up his broker, and said, sell me out. The shoe shine boys are giving stock tips, it's time to get out.
As summer turned to fall, the mood changed. As the stock market dipped, then rose, then lurched downwards again, investors grew increasingly uneasy. In September, an economist named Roger Babson sent a wave of fear rippling through Wall Street when he warned that sooner or later, a crash is coming, and it may be terrific. But